Live from the AM 860 KPAM studios, it's Mark and Dave. This is the radio show for all people, man or woman, young or old, conservative or liberal, Oregonian or Washingtonian, duck or beaver. 99 and 44 100th% hate-free common sense radio. Now, Mark and Dave on AM 860 KPAM and KPAM.com.
And I'm Mark Mason. Dave Anderson has the day off. Just how big is Google here in Oregon? It's getting bigger all the time. Their tentacles are reaching in far-off places out of Washington, D.C., including Oregon. And we'll have somebody, an expert here, who is going to give us, it's not so much a warning, but an education. And on the half hour, maybe a warning. A Middle East expert is going to join us, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. What's going on in Iraq, where after all those years and all those billions of dollars that we poured into Iraq, it's unraveling in weeks. And it's a scary thought because we're being told, hey, this ISIS, these terrorists, will face, it'll be a threat to the United States someday if they're successful in their attack on Baghdad and Iraq and Syria and maybe other targets in the Middle East. Well, how big a threat would they really be? An expert's going to weigh in, tell us how much we should be wringing our hands or not. That's this hour. How about some more things that I don't understand? Is that all right?
Let's.
Okay. So I'll get through these, and then we'll be done with it. I'll have had my say, and you can call 503-225-0860 on anything we've talked about.
Help him understand.
Yeah, help me understand these things. Or email Mark and Dave, MarkandDave @kpam.com. But Kim and Kanye. Kimye. Their daughter Northwest celebrated her first birthday party, and the parents, Kim and Kanye, through a what this was a recreation of Coachella in Southern California. Big music festival.
Huge.
Arguably one of the biggest in the country, right?
Yeah, it's basically the music festival.
Yeah, exactly. So they, on their sprawling estate, do a little mini Coachella and call it Kidchella.
Kidchella. From the people who brought you Northwest.
For their 1-year-old. The kid is 1. Now, I don't care how crazy or how cool that birthday party is. Do you remember anything when you were 1-year-old? No.
From my well, I'll tell you this. I'll tell you what I don't remember. Having Kidchella thrown for me.
Yeah, exactly. James, do you remember what anything when you were 1-year-old? Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
I've seen pictures.
So I don't, I don't get this. They're not doing it. I guess maybe I do get it. They're not doing it for the kid, are they?
No, goodness, no.
They're not doing it for the kid.
You're talking about, and this is coming from someone, I am a huge fan of Kanye West. He literally has the biggest ego on the planet. Nobody thinks more highly of themselves than Kanye West.
So he's really doing it just for the publicity
and
just all about excess and money, and I've got it, and I'll spend it any way I want, and I feel sorry for these kids who are just being exploited for his own personal gain, and people think it's cool. You shouldn't be thinking it's cool. You should be thinking it's disgusting. You know what else? And here's the other thing I don't understand. Speaking of money and excess, what's this with Hillary Clinton claiming, we don't have a lot of money. We're kind of
like
poor.
Some of those really wealthy people out there.
We're not overtly wealthy. What the heck is going on with that? She's wrecking her presidential hopes.
She's going full John Kerry on this one at this point.
You know what she is? She's in flames. The plane's headed in, and this going to end poorly. It's going to end badly. They can't stop this. She keeps stepping in it. Of course. Why doesn't she just admit?
Not on a Rick Perry level, but
why doesn't she admit they're millionaires?
Yeah.
Nobody in America holds it against you because you have a lot of money.
I think it's been $100 million since they left office, since Bill did. That's rich.
Yeah, that's not bad. All right, that's comfortable living. Admit it. Say you got a lot of money. You know, if you really want to say that, you know, we're kind of house poor or whatever, you know, explain it. If you're going to give it all away to charity, like Bill Gates or somebody, lay it out there. Instead, look at, they're even laughing at them on CNN. This is CNN, one of the biggest supporters of the Clintons on the planet. Cable news network, and they can't keep a straight face.
If she decides to run for president in 2016, despite earning more than $100 million since they left the White House, Clinton tells the Guardian newspaper her and her husband are still, quote, not truly well off. Really? And she says they're unlike other multimillionaires because, quote, we've done it through the dint of hard work.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. This follows her comment about them struggling to afford mortgages on their estates. Critics say it's another example of Clinton being out of touch with working Americans.
Of their estates?
Yeah, estates.
More than one.
I don't know what to do with my millions. It's very tough.
Me either.
It's very tough.
Time for an early start.
When CNN turns on you, your supporters. Those are the those are your peeps. And she keeps stepping in it. Oh, we're not truly well off.
She could pay me $1 million a year.
That is
and
a
I
joke.
will stop her from saying things
and
like
that's
this.
not just that's not jealousy talk. And I think it's just a lot of people say, you know, she is out of touch. So, you know, for everything, for all the, you know, the positive things we've been saying, we need a woman in office and everything else. She's, you know, I have a feeling this may be a replay of 2008, where, you know, all of a sudden we get to learn a little bit more about her again, and we kind of were reminded of the reasons why we didn't vote for her in the first place. And best of luck. The super rich, by the way, here's the list of super rich, what they worry about. What they were, it's a survey.
Their estates.
Looked at the top 4,500 of the world's wealthiest families. That's a lot of wealthy families. And the wealthiest worried about their fortunes killing their children's drive. Thank God. Thank God they recognize that. And people like Kim and Kanye go and they do it. Kimye, sorry. Fear ranked above worries over investments and marital breakdown. You know, and I'm glad they recognize that. I mean, it also gives you hope, right? That they're not all like Kimye and just spending money for the sake of spending money, and acting rich. Sting, I love what Sting had to say. Did you hear what he said? He said his kids are not going to inherit a penny of his $250 million that he's got in the bank.
Truly wealthy.
Sting is, not truly well off. You know, I had to play a lot of concerts for that. All right, straight ahead with Mark and Dave, the long arm of Google. And on the half hour, more on Iraq, how we got to where we are, and should we, in Portland, Oregon, be concerned about ISIS and the successes they've had in the Middle East. AM 860 KPAM, Mark and Dave. Google lobbyists descending on Oregon. What for? Well, could it be Google Fiber? Could it be the self-driving car? How about all of the above and more? And how will that change Oregon? Tony Rahm joins us at Politico.com. He's got a great story on Politico.com today all about it. Tony, welcome to the Mark and Dave Show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, you know, we are all in a lather over Google coming to Portland with Google Fiber, and we're thinking, at least I'm thinking, you know, Google's putting out these demands, and they're really dangling the carrot at the end of the stick for Portland, Oregon, and Google Fiber. What's in it for them? Then we hear that they're busy doing this in a lot of cities. There is something in it for them, isn't there?
You know, Google looks to bring fiber to more than just Portland. They're looking at total 34 cities, if it can, by the end of the year. The trouble for Google, though, is that, you know, it can't just lay down some cable. It's got to deal with regulators. It's got to talk to lawmakers. In some cases, it has to change the law because, you know, some of these state and city laws on the books didn't really anticipate the day that a competitor like Google might try to take on an AT&T or a Verizon. So it's got a lot of work to do to bring fiber to different locales. But as you said pretty accurately, the company's got to talk to regulators. It's got to see through it to these changes in laws. And they've hired lobbyists, not just in your state, but in states across the country to handle what's really becoming a plethora of business issues for this company.
Yeah, Google, I didn't know it, that they actually have an office, an office that would lobby legislators in D.C., is that right?
Well, Google has lots of offices in a lot of places, but Google is one of the bigger players here in D.C. You know, the company spent more than $3 million just in the first 3 months of this year to talk to members of Congress in D.C. about patent reform, about immigration reform, and a whole host of other issues that affect the company. But what we're starting to see is that Google is expanding. It's looking at the states as well, because state legislatures and city councils are starting to take up issues that really matter to this company. Whether we're talking about Google Glass, those are the computer-mounted glasses that you sometimes see in advertisements, or its famed self-driving car, Google is taking its battle to these capitals as it looks to stave off new regulation. So we're talking about a company with a lot of political power, and it's put to use.
Interesting. Are these battles clearing the way for innovation, or is the innovation coming first, and then they're trying to get these states to open the doors so that they can be employed?
You know, it's a little bit of both. With a self-driving car, I don't think a lot of people who wrote the rules of the road, literally speaking, ever really anticipated the day that we would have cars that drive themselves. And so there are lots of questions about, you know, what happens when a self-driving car gets into a car accident? Who's liable? How do you, register driver's licenses for these special classes of vehicles? And so Google has gone to battle to ensure it doesn't have to deal with 50 different laws in 50 states on its self-driving car. But in other cases, it's been defensive. When states or the federal government look to enact new privacy regulation, for instance, that might cause Google some harm, the company has mobilized with lobbyists and lawyers to try to defeat those privacy regulations. So, both sides of the coin here, but it's not something that just Google does. Obviously, every company lobbies. They want to protect their bottom line. Google just more so than other tech giants, has committed to this nationwide.
Sure, more than Microsoft ever has in the past, and Microsoft was hated for that in the past. And let me ask you this. You call Google a behemoth in Washington, D.C. Are they aiming to be behemoths in Oregon and all the other states in which they do business?
Google has really taken a very targeted interest when it comes to politics. They only really got into the lobbying game because they had to. And it's interesting you bring up Microsoft. When Google was under investigation by the federal government in about 2012 for being anti-competitive, it very quickly started hiring scores of lobbyists to stave off interest. And part of the reason why is because Google didn't want to be Microsoft. It didn't want to get caught sleeping at the wheel. And we all know that Microsoft, got clubbed by the federal government for being anti-competitive. So Google kind of looks at it through the lens of its competitors. And so it's taken to the states and it's taken to these cities because it recognizes that it has to play the political game, like it or not. But it doesn't seem to be the goal that Google wants to set up a shop in all 50 states and spend millions of dollars in each of those states. It just wants to ensure that it can bring its technologies to market with as few regulations as possible, whatever that ultimately entails.
Tony Rahm is a technology reporter for Politico with Mark and Dave. Whether they like the political game or not, they sure seem to be fast learners.
Yeah, that's definitely the case, especially, as I said, when it comes to Microsoft. They didn't want to get caught sleeping at the wheel. And they're certainly more active in Washington than some of their competitors. Facebook is sort of followed in the mold of Google. They're doing the same sorts of things that Google did maybe a few short years ago. But by and large, Google is probably Silicon Valley's most well-moneyed political player here in the nation's capital.
Google millionaires are I'm not sure they're loved in cities in which they live. In San Francisco, they seem to have congregated in certain parts of the South City, and people are upset at the way the neighborhoods have been rebuilt. Starting to happen in Portland, where one Google executive here is going to tear down a 100-plus-year-old home. Not that it isn't illegal. He had the money to buy it. But, people start resenting that. I look at it as signs that there's going to be a little bit of a backlash with all that money and power.
I suppose. I mean, I don't live, in your state. I haven't seen some of the firsthand troubles there in California. But I can tell you here in D.C. that they've certainly put their money to use towards seeing it so that they aren't investigated in the case of the antitrust case or pushing changes in federal law that might benefit them. One of the things that Google talks the most about here in Washington is patent reform. It's looking to stave off the companies that might sue it for the way it uses its patents. It's looking for ways to help bolster its business case. So, they've got political power. I don't think they've been out there lobbying on those specific issues that you raised, but certainly they could, I suppose.
Yeah,
if they wanted to commit to that.
And you're giving good examples of how they use the money for the greater good, for the greater company good. I guess mine was really a take on the personal wealth of the people who work for Google, and maybe there was a hint of jealousy in my voice. So that's how it is. Tony Rahm, a technology reporter for Politico. It's very interesting how things are unfolding here in Oregon and across America with Google. We appreciate you being on with Mark and Dave.
Thanks for having me.
AM 860 KPAM, what is really going on in Iraq, and how does that affect us here back home in the U.S., in Portland, Oregon? Mark and Dave. And David, it's Mark and David today. David Gartenstein-Ross, Middle East expert, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. We were talking about Iraq earlier. Let's break it down in a language we can understand, and David can do that. At least I hope you can, David.
Yeah, I think so. The group that has made a large advance over the course of the past couple of weeks is called ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. The group is the successor of al-Qaeda in Iraq, a group that caused a lot of damage during the course of the Iraq War and took a large number of American lives. It's no longer a part of the al-Qaeda network. It actually got kicked out for insubordination back in February. But its advance is nonetheless quite problematic for a number of reasons. The main one being, when we look at the regional map with the chaos in Syria, which borders Iraq, as well as what's happening in Iraq right now, there's a growing amount of instability, which already we're feeling the price to some extent at the pump. But over the longer term, I think there's a lot of risks involved when you have jihadist groups that are destabilizing any region, particularly one that's as important as the Middle East.
This ISIS band of insurgents, call them what you will, are they truly led by someone who was released by American officials some years ago?
Yes, that's correct. And the release was not from Guantanamo Bay, where you have a number of recidivists who've come out, but rather from a camp in Iraq, a prison camp in Iraq called Camp Bucca. Now, the reason why he was released, along with many others, is the United States was in the process of transferring its prisoners over to Iraqi custody and shutting down prisons that it used during the course of the Iraq War as we have prepared to get out of the country. There's some political debate, political discussion as to whether this should be seen as an Obama administration failure. He was released in 2009 under the Obama administration, but it's not clear that he should be, because that course had been in motion for quite some time of transferring detainees out as the U.S. got prepared to leave.
Is it as simple as saying, look, these people don't want democracy. They don't want their personal freedoms. If they can't fight for them, then why should they be given those? Why should we back them up?
Well, that is actually true to some extent. I wouldn't take it quite that far, but it's true to the extent that we shouldn't go to war to guarantee someone else's democracy. We shouldn't go to war to guarantee someone else's freedom, certainly not in our economic condition and not with the kind of blood we've suffered overseas. But when we look at the situation in Iraq, we do have a horse in the game. ISIS is a militantly anti-U.S. organization. It's one that is destabilizing both an ally of ours. It's destabilizing also an enemy of ours in Syria. And it started to spread itself into places like Jordan, also Lebanon. So we have a horse in the race. It's just that our interests are a bit limited because people in the region, it matters much more to them. That's why the administration has committed resources, but it also made clear that the U.S. is not going to take the lead in this. Rather, America will be helpful, but it won't be expending all the resources while it only gets a fraction of the game.
The Middle East has been unstable for centuries. Worst case scenario, I think we're concerned that nuclear weapons would fall into the wrong hands, and thus attacks could be made against America or Western Europe.
I'm not.
Go ahead.
I'm not as concerned about that in the Middle East because where would they get it from? You only have right now one nuclear state in the Middle East, which is Israel. I'm much more concerned about that happening in South Asia, where Pakistan is very unstable. It has a nuclear program, and if you saw jihadists make massive advances in Pakistan, you'd have to worry about that. But I think nuclear weapons are indeed the nightmare scenario. I think we're looking at something which is still dangerous, but a few steps down from that. We've already seen some of the foreign fighters who've gone over to Syria return home to Europe. You have a large number of Europeans, about 3,000, who've gone over to fight in Syria. One of them very recently carried out a deadly shooting at the Brussels Jewish Museum. There's going to be concerns about some of these guys carrying out lower-scale terrorist attacks when they get back to Europe. And I think something like the mid-range attacks like train bombings in Madrid and public transit bombings in London that occurred back in 2005, those are the models of the kind of plots we're going to worry about. Not the highest end, not the highest impact, but also quite dramatic, and there's definitely the threat that lives will be lost.
Would those plots extend to U.S. soil?
There's a risk. We quite fortunately don't have the same level of risk as Europe, though. Mm-hmm. You have about 100 people or so who've gone over to fight in Syria, whereas, as I said, the number in Western Europe is about 3,000. So in terms of a question of scale, fortunately for the United States, it's much more difficult to get over to Syria from the U.S. than it is from Western Europe. Another reason why you have such a difference is you have both a smaller Muslim population in the United States and also a Muslim population that feels far less isolated than do Europe's population. So there's a number of factors which cause this difference and mean that the U.S. as well as Canada have a lower degree of risk than West Europe does.
David, today the Obama administration releases the memo, or at least it's public now, justifying drone strikes on American citizens overseas. I would think we're talking about Middle East scenarios or even Asian scenarios. Does this make sense to you? Is this something that will protect America?
Well, it's a drone strike that was authorized against one specific individual.
Right.
Is looking at Anwar al-Awlaki, who the U.S. did kill with the drone, someone who was both a terrorist recruiter and also an operational commander for al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Looking at the policy, number one, it does make sense to me that when someone is at war with you, that you can strike back at them. But secondly, I think that we should be hesitant to give the presidency the power to kill American citizens overseas without any sort of checks and balances. We have a government that is founded on checks and balances, and I would like to see some judicial oversight of that process. I understand why the administration did it that way, and that they didn't have time to really set up a judicial system and create that system for judicial review. But I think that all American citizens should feel more comfortable if you have some sort of judicial review of the decision to strike an Americans overseas.
I have a feeling that ISIS is going to be in our vocabulary for some time to come.
Indeed.
David, a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for being with Mark and Dave.
Thanks. It was a pleasure joining you. I'm always happy to talk to my brethren out in Oregon.
David Gartenstein-Ross, Middle East expert and Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies.
Don't get fooled again. Don't get fooled again. No.
Ties to the topic of Believe It or Don't today. Every afternoon, we give Jeff Mitchell 3 true or false factoids, each factoid intelligently designed by the factoid staff to confuse and mislead Jeff. For everyone he gets a point. Everyone he gets right, he gets a point. For everyone he gets wrong, Mark and Dave get a point at the end of the week. The loser buys lunch. Ties in honor of
World Cup.
Yes, World Cup with that
Dazzling performance.
Yeah,
that ended in a tie.
Am I the only person that's just disgusted? Everybody else, tie, good for you. Oh yeah, we're on our way.
Not a fan of them myself.
It's going to cost us.
Yeah.
How?
It just feels unresolved.
Yeah, and maybe that's our culture. Maybe that's what I'm having difficulty trying to understand. That's the American culture, because we want everything resolved. We want it done. We have this fast food mentality that we want definitive answers, and we can't take a tie like the rest of the world can. But that's what makes America great.
That's right.
That's why we're go-getters. We don't settle for ties. How do we do that? Settle for a tie.
There's no tie. There are no ties in baseball. There's no ties in football.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh, there's ties in Major League Soccer. Hey. There were no losers. There were no losers. Isn't that wonderful? Oh, Oh, the new America.
It's not our sport, so that's, it didn't come from us. So.
All right, so here we go.
All right.
When tying the knot in Britain, it's considered good luck to find a spider in your wedding dress. Believe it or don't.
Yeah, I'll go with it.
It is true. It is good. You lead 1-0, Mr. Mitchell. There are 36 ways in which to tie a tie.
36. Wow. Sure. Yeah.
No, there are 85. 85 ways. A surgeon's knot is the most common knot used when tying a dry fly for fishing.
A surgeon's knot. No, I don't believe that.
You're right. A nail knot, N-A-I-L, nail knot is used on most dry flies, and every fisherman listening is going, yeah, of course. All right, 2-1. Lucky you.
Did not
lucky
tie.
sometime. Did not tie.
You know what? Here's the other thing. In our eliminator contest, did we have a tie?
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, did we have a tie? No, we did not. We had a winner, right? And we had losers. My wife hates it when I say, it's like Ricky Bobby. If you're not first, you're last. He was wise. Ricky Bobby was a wise
Sage
man.
Advice from Ricky Bobby.
He was. Man, there should be inscribed on a building somewhere. Some government building. If you're not first, you're last.
The government needs to take more cues from Will Ferrell movies in general, I think.
Yeah, that's very good. But we had a winner, and last Friday, it was the Anktel Heating and Cooling Ultimate Civil War Game Day Experience. The limo for 6 to and from the game, the pregame tailgate party with lunch. Ooh, what if the game is a night game? What happens there?
You still get lunch.
Okay. And the tickets and the press pass and all that kind of stuff. So the kind of the VIP treatment. That's very cool. I was at the aforementioned Tiger Balloon Festival over the weekend, and I'm enjoying the car show yesterday. It's my favorite event of the week. I just love that thing. It's a lot of fun. If you've never been, you have to go. If nothing else for that Rogue Hazelnut Brown Ale.
Okay, how many free cases did they give you?
They're nothing.
Really?
No, I paid $5 for a thimble with a handle on it. That's what it was.
Festival pricing.
It's so tasty. It's the only time I drink that at the festival every year. But there's a woman who comes up to me and she just goes, "Hi, I'll see you at the Eliminator show on Thursday."
Oh, cool.
Marianne was her name, as a matter of fact.
Yes,
and she said she won on our show, and she can't wait. And she can't wait to see who wins the Civil War trip. And she said, "Oh, my husband's a big Beavers fan." So, we're trying to figure out why that was the last one standing, because there were a lot of great prizes on there. It's not that the Civil War wasn't, but there was cash next to it. Tannisbourne Grocery Outlet, which, by the way, what was Tannisbourne Grocery Outlet? That was $500 to a charity,
to the Children's Cancer
Association, and $500 in the winner's name to the charity of their choice. They're still going to do that.
Oh, excellent!
Yeah, they're still going. Yeah,
those guys.
I know. Tannisbourne Grocery Outlet. Come on, let's give it up for them. Because they're going to make sure CCA is whole and the charities are whole, because that's why they got into the Eliminator to begin with.
Rest easy, Eliminator winners.
Now, guys, you want to still throw in that $1,000 for Mark and Dave. As long as you're feeling generous. But that's awesome. I knew it. But so somebody on Thursday, so be listening Thursday when we'll have our players here. And sometime during the show, we'll do that drawing. Do we have a plan on when it will happen? Do we know exactly when it'll happen?
I think we'll just wing it.
We're just going to wing it? All right.
Do I sound confident?
Are they going to be serving Rogue Ale, Hazelnut Brown?
I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, if you can pull those strings. No, you better not do that, because then you know what happens. Then I get crazy. Then I get crazy on the air. Things will be said that people will regret.
You'll land a hot air balloon in a prison yard.
Yes, at Coffee Creek Correctional Center. All right. There's still this stack of things I don't understand. I'm not done with it yet. But we have so much to talk about. We got to talk about the possibility of Multnomah County and the DA filing charges against the Padgett family for their son's involvement in the Reynolds school shooting case. Could happen. I'll tell you what the clues are that may come down. And new developments in the Malaysia Air case. Find out what officials are saying. That's in the next half hour with Mark and Dave on Monday afternoon. Thanks for being with us. AM 860 KPAM, 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 AM 860 KPAM.